back. Here we are, episode 6 of GMA Beyond the Fight. Gods of Martial Arts, the only MMA promotion in the world that truly celebrates ancient martial arts traditions while treating fighters as celebrities. We had a show, our first show of 2025 last night, GMA 4, only Vietnamese, and we're going to see the ancient martial arts traditions next weekend on the 24th of May, where we're going to have fighters from 4 different countries: Cambodia, Malaysia, Myanmar, and Thailand on its own stage to see mixed martial arts. Here today we have a special guest, former UFC coach, black belt for the last 20 or 30 years, and too many other accolades to list. Liam, welcome to the show.
Shake hands. Good to see you again, sir.
Yes.
It's great to be here.
Yes. So Liam, you came to the show last night. It was your first experience at Gods of Martial Arts.
It was. So I've been following the show since I arrived. I'd heard about it, so I watched it online, but coming to see it was totally different. I mean, I don't know if they can see it on the camera here, but I've been taking photos for the last half an hour of just the setting that you guys have put it in and the effort to detail just on the corner posts. Yeah. I felt like I was in on the set of Kickboxer and people were coming out with glass in their hands, you know, like the old Van Damme movie. It was wild, man. It was wild. I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. Yeah.
So what was, I mean, you have a lot of experience. You've been around the world.
Yes.
You know, as a grappling coach, a consultant for grappling gyms around the world. Yep. And also a UFC coach.
Yes.
So what was different about last night?
Yeah, so I mean, look, I've been privy to see shows starting and maturing, including the UFC, which has been great to watch over the last probably, when did I start becoming a fan? In 1994. So 30 years I've been a fan of the UFC. I've got to work at the UFC, which is nice. And I've got to see ONE FC, Invicta, Shuto, and all the, all the kind of what we call common shows now starting and maturing. So it was nice to get to see something like this at kind of, I wouldn't say grassroots, because you're not at the grassroots level right now.
Yes.
It's starting to become very, very professional, and you've obviously got a lot of investment in it. But what I liked about it is it wasn't just about the fighting. It was about the experience for the audience, and the martial artists. It was like walking into an ancient temple in an ancient time, kind of like reminiscent of like blood sport and, those sort of things. It was intoxicating. So I think a lot of the shows that start up, some of the Japanese shows get this right, and I think the audience really buys into it, which is great. But a lot of the shows just become, like Reebok sponsored kind of, athletic events.
Okay.
This felt like a throwback to the ancient times. It was really cool, man. I was really, really pumped. So it was fun to be here.
It's really cool because these guys really put a lot of thought into it.
100%.
Like, especially the attention to detail. They really want the experience for the fans, not just here.
Well, just a simple thing. My friend and I were there noticing. He used to work at Deep and Rising, the Japanese shows. One of the attentions to detail was every fighter had a custom walkout song. Yes. And that's wild for the audience to see, So there was nothing generic about last night, which I think is so important. Yeah.
And they do such a good job of making sure that that experience you can have at home through the production.
Sure.
Through the live stream. They do, and the production team does an incredible job with that, and it's unlike anything I've seen in martial arts. But I don't have the experience that you have.
No, I mean, So if I'm blunt with you, there have been attempts at it, and I've been to lots of shows over time that tried to do this, but they never made it past the first, second show. So in Australia, we had a show very similar with a similar ring, and I'm pointing to the octagon-shaped ring over there. Yeah. And instead of ropes, they had chains, and so people were getting tossed into chains, and it was really cool. Everyone got pumped about it, but it didn't last for 2 shows, So I think what makes
what was that?
What was it called?
No, why did it fail?
It's a fantastic question, actually. So I think what happens is a lot of people have bright ideas. They get a little bit of a backer going. They know there's demand for it. People want to see fighting at the end of the day. But they get the 1 or 2 shows in, and then they see the cash, they see the quick win, they see the ticket sales.
Okay.
But then they forget that you've got to, even if you do 2 shows a year, you're making a bit of cash. It's a lot of effort. I mean, to do a show is a ton of effort. There's so many moving parts. From the advertising to just filming the show, to the executive team behind it, the athlete I mean, there's so much that goes into a show, right?
Yeah.
And just having a bright idea doesn't make you a filmmaker, for example, right? People don't see what's happening. And it's funny because we're sitting here and even to our right, they can't see. I mean, there's writers, there's auditions, there's all these people there standing behind these lights. There's producers, there's a sound guy. Like, when you watch a show, you see the video, but you don't see what happens behind the scenes.
Exactly.
And it's like a duck. You see a duck on a lake, but you don't see the legs underneath the water.
Yes.
So a lot of these shows die in the first, second, and third show because they don't get a team behind them, the right team. People with vision, people who can apply and apply the, God, I'm thinking of the wrong word. People who can make it happen, right?
Yes.
And it's so important to get the right team behind you. So when I was here last night, one of the things that was different to all these startup shows I see is I saw the right team. So obviously, you're what do you do? Athlete relations. You do
international fighter relations. I do this podcast. And the live English commentary.
And you're involved on the executive level and getting things going behind the scenes, right? So And the thing is, having been to the UFC, which is one of the biggest shows in the world, there is a massive team behind that. They scout and they find the best people to do it. Just even the production team in the hotel is huge. The behind the scenes scene at the show is huge. The executive team doing the marketing is huge. So I think the big thing is a lot of people have bright ideas, but they can't execute. And they can't execute over time.
Okay.
And I think that's the difference.
You feel like they lose sight of what their original idea in exchange for quick cash?
Well, they see the quick cash, but the visionary of the show starts to get bogged down in the practicalities of the show. And they lose motivation. It becomes just too hard. And there's easier ways to make money than doing this, because this takes longevity. This takes being able to stay in the grind and have a vision and have a discipline, for a long time. And the funny thing is, I know you're the head of the show is Johnny Chin Yun, right?
Yeah,
so, long-time martial artist.
Yeah.
If you look at martial arts, right, for example, a fighter needs 3 things, right? I remember an old Brazilian saying this to me. I thought it was brilliant.
Okay.
He said a fighter needs vision, they need love, and they need discipline, right? So the thing is, they need to have a vision of where they want to be.
Yep.
They have to have love for what they do. Then they have to have an order in which to get there, right? And everybody has vision. That's the easy part. Having discipline and having an order in which to take you on the road to that place is the hard part. And I can see that here. There's a vision, but there's also an investment in, the team that's going to actually get them there. And I think that's where a lot of early shows fall off, if that makes sense.
No, that actually does make sense. And
just interrupt you, sorry, for a sec. I mean, and it doesn't surprise me because the 2 guys behind it are filmmakers. And film is one of the hardest things in the world. But these guys have been in the industry for 20 plus years. To survive that long, I mean, they know what it takes, and they know what the importance of a team. So obviously they brought people like you on board, and the producers standing over there on board, because you can't do it all yourself. So I think that's important.
And they do such a good job of directing everything.
Well, I mean, look at their pedigree, right?
Any project you worked on with them is just a pleasant experience.
Yeah, 100%.
You know what I mean? And you can see that, starting, they've done all these projects in Hollywood and things like that. And then, and then he's started this, 10 years ago, close to it. So he's been doing this for a long time.
Yes.
And he has instead versus someone who has a bright idea.
Yes.
Who's never been in film, never been in martial arts, never been in show business.
Yeah.
Because there's so many, just like you said, so many things can happen.
Well, how many guys have you had? You're a coach as well, right? So how many guys have you had show up to your gym and say, hey, I want to be a fighter. I want to be Conor McGregor. I want to be in the UFC. And they don't even show up for the second practice.
More than I can count.
But promoters are like that too. They have a bright idea, they put in a show. But the thing is, the thing about martial arts, running a gym and running a show and film, they all have a very similar core to them, which is delayed gratification. You know, so
Yes.
investing, spending, reinvesting, money comes later. You know, you become a famous athlete, you get money later. But you have to spend that money on yourself for years. You run a gym, you have to reinvest the money in your gym to grow it, you know. Same with athletes, same with filmmakers, and same with promoters. So a lot of promoters, I think, expect to make money early. But the key is that money they earn has to be reinvested in the team to grow the thing, to grow it for the long-term gain. And the money comes. And look at Dana White, man. I mean, look, they just, what did they sell UFC for $4 billion? Bought it for like $4 million. You know what I mean? Or something ridiculous. But you know how much discipline and vision and reinvestment that took to get it to that level? Most people aren't cut out for that, you know?
That's true. Just like you said, there's so many moving parts, there's so many things that go wrong.
100%.
You know, just our little small grappling events that we've had.
Well, you know, you've put on grappling events.
But they're just it's very amateur compared to what God's martial arts do. And even that can be nerve-wracking. So many things can go wrong, right? And you go to any, you know, I've participated in many wrestling tournaments since I was 14, 15 years old.
Of course.
There's always something that goes wrong with the tournament.
100%.
You know, the referees don't show up.
I've been a promoter twice. I'll never be a promoter again.
Yeah.
I've been a referee twice. I'll never be a ref again.
I was a referee. I was a referee once.
But being a promoter is so hard, man. You know, people dropping out on the night. You know, people getting poached by other organizations, not telling you, and suddenly you see them show up on another poster. You know, doing what you do, athlete relations, matchmaking, mate, you've got to have steel in your blood, man. You know, it's hard. It's tough.
It is hard, but it's a lot easier because I work with these guys.
100%.
Because this is an easy.
100%.
It's easy to sell this.
That's a good sign.
It's easy for me to sell this because I believe in it and I'm excited about it, and I'm going to promote it. I'm going to promote this whether I work for them or not.
Yeah. Look, you seem like the kind of person who can't fake it.
I don't think I could.
No, for sure. You know, but also, man, I saw you in your when you were working in Saigon Super Fights. I think I was here for the second one, maybe.
Yeah, you were there for the second one.
The second one, right? So
when our friend Rob was there.
Yeah. Man, that's a passionate guy. He's a passionate man.
That's what way to say.
You know what? I always respect passion. You know, I always respect passion.
Without
question. You don't have to like it, but you have to respect it. And he's a very serious man. He's very passionate, and I very much respect that. Sometimes I don't see eye to eye, like a lot of people, you know. But that I respect that, you know. And I think in the business of fighting, sometimes your team isn't always people you see eye to eye with, but if there's someone who delivers and someone who has values, that's someone you want to work with. You know, you don't always have to be enjoying a cup of tea with them, you know. So
exactly.
But you know, man, look, I saw you stressing over Saigon Super Fights, and I saw that you went through that stage where you weren't making any money from it. You couldn't. And then by the time you hit your third or fourth one, you actually had started to develop a proper business there.
Yeah.
And that's what it takes, man. You can't just put the cash in your pocket on the first two and then hope for the best. You know, reinvestment is everything.
That's true. Yes. And thankfully we have a lot of good sponsors that without our sponsors, it wouldn't have been possible. And we've had a really good team to help build it. Adam did a lot to help build it.
Yep, 100%. I watched you guys behind the scenes, man. You guys dying. You were killing yourself over it.
He was incredible. How much he contributed to the growth, not only Saigon Super Fights, but you know the impact he's had on the grappling community in Vietnam and throughout Southeast Asia. And a lot of people don't recognize that.
Yeah,
well, not that he really wants that, but he's been a big part of that scene.
Well, that's what attracted me at first. Because look, I'm out of the industry somewhat at the moment.
Yeah.
You know, I'm injured. I can't run a gym. But when I first came here, I recognized the energy and the reinvestment. And for me, you know, martial arts and community is reinvestment. You know, so on every level, right? And the thing is, with Saigon Super Fight, if you didn't do it, nobody was going to do it.
Yeah.
You know, so you guys end up getting people over to Malaysia, etc. And I think there's a lot of similarities with God's martial art. You know, because God's martial arts. Yeah. Because the scene here is new. I've been going to watch. I watched Saigon, lion fights. Vietnamese are very passionate. Their martial arts is in their blood, the way it is with Japanese and Chinese culture, which I think a lot of people don't realize. Man, you're driving your bike, you see kids on the back of bikes, martial arts uniforms. Everybody here loves martial arts, right?
Yeah.
That's not something that's that well known. publicly outside of Vietnam. But, there needs to be someone who invests in the grappling community and
Yeah.
in the MMA community, because they're not ready for international level yet.
They're not.
But if someone doesn't take the responsibility,
Yep.
it'll never happen. So reinvestment
sure.
is an investment in the show itself.
Exactly.
So I know that you've been going to countries outside of here, Cambodia and stuff, and teaching wrestling
Yes.
to raise their level. Because if you don't put that investment in, who's going to do it? We all rise
No,
together.
You're right. And
so-
I think, I've been working with God's Martial Arts since October.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And I've seen, and I'm seeing like a seismic shift in martial arts throughout Southeast Asia.
Yep.
And this is what I mean by that. This is becoming, whether people realize it or not, like the epicenter of martial arts in Southeast Asia, because there's a big prize. The fighters are treated as celebrities. They get to tell their story. And
Yep.
there's really no central, other than ONE FC,
Yeah,
there's really
for sure.
no central MMA show in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so who are we recruiting? We're recruiting the traditional Kun Khmer fighters, the Lethwei fighters out of Myanmar.
Yep.
The Malaysians have their own, but they have a lot of amateur MMA experience, because there's a lot of amateur MMA promotions, and we're in Cambodia, Laos, but not a lot of fighters out of Laos yet. So, but what do we have? We have fighters who've been doing these ancient martial arts,
Yes.
and now they're going to MMA. A
Sure,
lot
sure.
of times, there's their MMA debut, but they have 125 Lethwei
For sure.
fights. So
Adds up.
their records are like 119-16 or
Yeah.
something like that, right?
Yeah.
It's incredible. What we're seeing now, Liam, is these guys are starting to realize that, hey, we need to learn how to wrestle, and we
Yeah.
need to learn how to grapple if we're going to win these
Yes, I
MMA
agree with
fights.
that.
And what are they doing? In Phnom Penh, these guys are going over to Kiri Jiu-Jitsu,
Nice.
and they're learning because they want to win here in August or this weekend.
Well, look, I mean, the thing is, in Muay Thai, in Lethwei, Kun Khmer, there isn't a lot of money. There's not a lot of ways to take your family out of poverty and elevate yourself.
Yeah.
MMA offers that. It's
Exactly.
an international sport. There is a lot. Well, look, compared to basketball, there's not a lot of money. But with all the people who complain about, UFC doesn't pay this and this is blah blah blah, it's still a lot of money to someone who lives in, a Southeast Asian country. To make,
Yeah.
12 and 12 US dollars, $1,000
Yeah.
US dollars for
Yeah.
one fight. It's a lot of money, right? So what I was going to say though is that the tricky thing is, for a promotion that wants to invest in the area, which is what you guys are doing, is matchmaking is so important. You can't put a Kun Khmer fighter against an experienced jiu-jitsu guy right now. It's
Yeah.
just going to be ugly. It's going to end up in mount. He's going to
Yeah.
get pounded, and he's going to get discouraged, right? So, and I see you guys doing this, obviously because you're one of the matchmakers as well,
Yep.
is providing matches that look at the future of the sport, not just
Exactly.
that moment, just pleasing a crowd, So giving them people with similar experience. A Kun Khmer fighter can fight a Lethwei fighter. They both
Yes.
have a similar grappling experience.
on an MMA stage,
100%.
which is interesting.
But MMA is the purest form of martial arts.
Yes.
At the end of the day, we've got rules, but at the end of the day, it's the purest expression of martial arts. If you're a martial artist that is interested in the evolution of martial arts, your karate needs to work in MMA. Your Lethwei needs to work in MMA. That is integrity. That is authenticity. And I don't think they should replace Lethwei with grappling, but they need to evolve so that their art works in there, and that's how you become a superstar, and that's how you bring
Exactly.
your culture to the forefront of martial arts,
Yep.
right? So I can see you guys are doing that because there weren't a lot of mismatches. People were mostly evenly matched, with an eye on the future. A lot of arts,
Yeah.
a lot of shows would just chuck a Lethwei guy in with a wrestler and just
Yeah.
smash him to pieces,
Now
It's no good.
it's going to be interesting this year, and I've really only been studying the Kun Khmer
Yeah.
and the Lethwei over the last 6 months or so, because we've been recruiting from those countries
Sure,
in
sure,
these
sure.
fighters. And by the way, these fighters, you're talking about fighters who fight for $10 every weekend, and now they have a chance to win $7,000.
100%. That's a whole
So that's
year.
huge. It's like
It's a whole year.
it's
in one fight.
at least, right?
100%.
So
That makes a
but
difference to their family.
And what I've seen is the Kuhn Khmer fighters, they're proud to be Kuhn Khmer fighters.
Yep, 100%.
And that's great. And what I've also seen them rely too much on the Kuhn Khmer when they go into and we're going to see this next weekend because one of the guys he has the most professional MMA experience out of pretty much everyone in the entire tournament.
Right.
He has 6 fights in ONE FC. Right.
There's a Kuhn Khmer fighter.
Kuhn Khmer, his name's Rens Roth.
Sure.
Yeah. Really good fighter, very good striker. But, sometimes might rely too much heavily on his Kuhn Khmer, and then when he gets into a grappling situation, when he gets on bottom and he's feeling that pressure, it's, he struggles to really come back to that and have an answer for it, right? But what's going to happen is Gods of Martial Arts is basically bringing everyone together, and then people. I do believe that because of Gods of Martial Arts, grappling is going to go up.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the thing is, where there's money, there's development. So the Kuhn Khmer fighters might struggle for a little bit. When they hear that another guy of their kind of style and their culture is making $7,000 a fight, or whatever I'm just making the number up, but they're making good money for a very inexperienced MMA fighter. They're going to start to realize we can do this too. We need to bring some investment in here. We need to get some coaches. So when the money's there, the teams will form. Someone has to take that money. Why not us?
Exactly.
So if you put that beacon, which is what you guys are doing, things will happen around it. And if they don't, they're fools. So you can't save people from themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
At the end of the day.
And I think this year is basically we have a lot of amateur fighters.
Yep.
Right? Because it's the first year.
Sure.
Just like you were saying, I learned the hard way on the reputation of MMA promoters. Because I became an MMA promoter recruiting, and some coaches were like, "This is too good to be true." Like, I know about you promoters, and they would just
they don't trust
they wouldn't even talk to me.
They don't trust promoters.
They wouldn't even talk to me. So that's when I was like, "Oh, there's a reputation."
Yeah, there's not just a reputation. There's a deep. I mean, you can understand this goes back to boxing. This goes back to Muay Thai.
I don't know any of this.
This is hundreds of years old. So, I think one of the problems with MMA, just on a, if you're advising someone who's new to the sport, is there is the technical side, but the sport management and professional side, it exists elsewhere. Wrestlers obviously have a deep experience with wrestling, but not in a professional sense. So you got to look at boxing. Boxing's been around forever. There are fantastic books like The Black Lights and stuff, where it goes through the tricks the promoters play, what a coach and a manager needs to know, the dirty, the clean, everything. So, as an athlete and as a coach, you need to study other things. Not just MMA's too new. We have some good innovations, especially in dieting and athletic performance, and obviously technical innovations.
Yep.
But when it comes to the business side of it, it all exists in boxing already. You just need to study that. Right?
Okay.
So you've walked into an industry that's used to promoters being despicable. Despicable, right? And can I tell you something interesting about that, if you don't mind?
Please.
Is that the ones that last the longest, and boxing's an exception because Don King kind of messed it up a little bit, but and some of the other guys. But the ones and the UFC gets a bad rap. But the matchmakers at the UFC are actually real stand-up guys. If you ever speak to Sean Shelby, back in the day it was Joe Silva, I could email him and say, hey, my fighter is this. And he'd say, look, your fighter's doing really good. We need him to, leave the UFC for a bit, they're actually interested in developing fighters because what they understand is this, is that the UFC thrives on territories, right? The more territories, the more money. So we have an Australian champion, we have more people buying pay-per-views in Australia, right?
That makes sense.
So we need to invest in Australian fighters, but we also can't bullshit them. So we don't pay them too much so that they, we pay them the right amount at the level they are because they need to stay hungry and they need to develop. So I used to think, UFC doesn't pay all this stuff. I think they pay perfectly fine. If you're flattening people and you're a highlight reel bringing money to the UFC, they will pay you. If you're a journeyman who makes decisions and loses here and there, they'll just pay you like basically they'll pay you a low level or put you on a low level tier. But what I will say is I trust the UFC promoters, matchmakers, and I grew to trust them because they'd have a conversation and you come to learn they're actually interested in developing your territory and your athlete. They don't want to see you get smashed. They want to see stars coming out of Australia. They recognize talent, they want to develop it. So largely, the bigger promotions actually have trustworthy promoters and matchmakers. Promoters is the wrong word, matchmakers. So I think that you coming in, you're a wrestler from a wrestling background, you have good values, and you have an interest in growing the sport. If you can get them to trust you and understand that you're actually here to develop their territory, which starts with the fighters, you will actually grow the sport as a whole. And they will make more money trusting you to give them good matches, So
that's good advice.
But can I say one thing you shouldn't do?
Yes.
And this is a trick promoters do, and I don't like it. As a coach, it's dirty. I tell my fighters, if they call you, you tell them to call me, and we won't work with them anymore. They try to call, promoters try to call fighters to get them to say yes before the coach gets an opinion, right? Because they're being mismatched. So they wouldn't do that, right? So the coach... The matchmaker's role is to develop a relationship with the coach and the athlete together. If you bypass that, you'll lose the trust of the coach. And the only reason you would bypass that is to give them a fight that's not good for them. And managers do that too. And you've got to be very careful who you choose as managers as a fighter. They'll often bypass because they want the payday. So the coach is the pivotal person here.
Yeah.
So, and I know you have good relationships with the coach. You're a wrestler, of course you do. Coach is everything, right, in wrestling.
Yes.
So I can see you developing relationships with teams, not just with athletes. And I think that builds trust. So that's a real good investment. I think you're on the right track.
Yeah. It's very exciting.
Essay finished.
I'm sorry?
My essay is finished.
Oh no, I'm here. I'm your student. I see you as a coach in many ways. So.
And I appreciate that. But look, I've seen the dirty side of it, and none of the dirty guys last. Oh, sorry. None of the dirty promoted tricks last.
Yeah, that's good.
So they don't last in the long game because they don't invest in the community.
Yep.
And if you invest in just one star, and he leaves, you're dead.
Exactly.
So it's a lot like coaching. You don't invest in one star, you invest in the team.
Exactly.
You investing in territories and communities and arts is the key for the future. It might not pay off immediately, but long term, 100% will pay off. So keep doing that.
Yeah. And we have some really passionate teams going to be here next weekend. And it's a Kun Khmer team.
Yep.
It's called the Ring Kun Khmer. And they are super passionate, really awesome guys to work with. Can't wait to meet them in person. We've got some folks out of Thailand.
Yep.
We've got, just a lot of really good teams that are very passionate about their sport. Yeah,
sure.
And really excited to be part of God's Martial Arts. And we're all coming together after 6 months.
Yeah.
After nearly 6 months of recruiting, negotiating, matchmaking, making sure the fights are okay.
Yeah.
The weigh-ins, and it's all coming together next weekend. And I think it's going to be a beautiful thing. This is going to be the first international event.
Look, I mean, here's the thing, right? So, when I first started getting involved and interested in martial arts, in mixed martial arts, which back then was called NHB, no holds barred, right?
Okay.
So the UFC starts up. What brought me to the to the sport was style versus style. That was what's interesting. Can a wrestler beat a karate guy? Can a kung fu dude beat a boxer? Can a boxer beat a jiu-jitsu guy?
It's like this conversation. What's the best martial art?
100%.
And this is let's find out.
We are going to find out. But the tricky thing now is that there are grapplers out there. Back in the day with the UFC, the grapplers didn't really understand how to use it in real fighting yet. So wrestlers weren't empowered yet. Judo guys weren't empowered. Jiu-jitsu guys had that long history of vale tudo. So they knew how to use jiu-jitsu against strikers and stuff, right? Because, for whatever reason, we can get, you can go into the history of jiu-jitsu, right? Once the wrestlers knew how to use their wrestling, they were almost invincible for a while, right?
Yeah.
So the tricky thing is that these guys are not coming into UFC 1. They're coming into UFC 300 and something, and so the internet has provided knowledge, right? So
yes.
So to express their martial art, they have to put their ego aside and their culture aside for a little bit to learn the art of MMA and grappling.
That is a really good point.
That is the key point.
And that's what these strikers that come from these ancient traditions,
Beautiful
They-
traditions.
They just need to add to that.
Sure.
They need to add to that, I believe.
100%. And so, when I went to Thailand my first time in 1998, I'd started grappling, and, the Thais were still looking, oh, the UFC, yeah, we can do this. I have big heart. They would say I have big heart, And the Thais can wrestle standing. They clinch, like Greco, basically, right?
They can get the
right?
clenches. They're really good
man.
at it.
They can toss
a really
dudes
good Muay
around.
Thai, yeah. And then they do that trip.
So I watched Randy Couture doing Greco or clinching with the French Muay Thai champion, and Randy couldn't take him down. When he hit the legs, of course, but in Greco, the Thai champion was actually even with Randy as far as off balancing and throwing, right? Once you added legs, whole different game. Of course, wrestler kill him, right? But the thing is the Thais had this idea that fighting's about heart. Now that's true to a degree, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, you have to catch up with technology. It's like a doctor saying health is about being happy. Yeah, but you still need penicillin, right? You still need your CAT scan.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like, so the thing is, with all these beautiful old martial arts, I want to see them rise to the top.
Yeah.
But they have to put their ego aside a little bit, because it's not 1993 right now. It's not.
That's true.
It's not. The information is out there, so they need to learn how to grapple. They need to learn the art of MMA. So there's grappling, which I think is the best starting point, and then there's the art of MMA, kind of like the coding that the sport has developed, and then they can express their martial art. Without the grappling and the MMA language, the matrix behind it, they can't express their art. So
Yes, that's
I
a
think
really good point.
and it's not hard. The information's there. The experts are there, right? I think the tricky thing is for a lot of them, though, is in their countries they don't have a lot of grappling tournaments that they can compete in, right? So there's three levels they need, right? They need a professional organization as the the lighthouse, putting the beacon out, which is what you guys are doing, right? The money's there. If they want it, it's there, right?
Yep.
But to take it, they have to invest in their grappling and their MMA. That means they have to have an amateur MMA development scene, which I think
Yes.
you've discussed already for GMAs looking at doing stuff like that.
Well, yeah.
But
Yep.
before that, they need to have a grappling circuit. They can regularly compete in that. They don't get
Yes.
injured, because you don't get injured doing grappling, right?
Because you can do 11 matches in one day in grappling.
You can do 100 matches a year. How many matches did you do in wrestling a year?
I don't know, man.
Hundreds,
I've done
Hundreds.
more than 10 in one day.
Well, you would have done hundreds in a year,
Yeah,
most probably,
hundreds.
right? And so you look at that, and
But
you're
I think another thing is, and maybe you can touch on this, is this is just an observation that in my limited coaching and,
Sure.
and competing and things like that.
I wouldn't say limited. You're a D1 champion.
I
I wouldn't say limited.
I was not a
but
champion.
maybe
I was not a
MMA.
champion. I'm not like.
You were ranked in D1 though.
I wasn't. I'm not really. I was a D1 wrestler and I
Right,
did
right.
okay.
Sorry,
and I
understood.
won some matches, but
You won matches at D1. You're pretty good.
but it's like there's times there's times in grappling and in MMA where you got to slow the fight down.
100%.
And when you're on top, you got to slow the fight down
Sure,
so that you
sure,
can
sure.
end the fight, whether it's through ground and pound or through some kind of submission.
Yeah.
And sometimes I forget that people don't know that. And,
yeah.
And I think what we saw that last night in the first half
Oh
of
man,
the
everyone
show,
gassed in the first
it
round.
was how many times was there a change in top position in some of those early
Yeah.
fights last night?
So there was a fantastic fight, the second fight of the night.
Yep.
I'm sorry for the guys who, if you're listening, I don't know their names right now.
Yep.
I didn't have a brochure with me, but it was a jiu-jitsu guy versus Lin Fong. How do you pronounce it?
Liam Fong.
Lin Fong guy.
Yep.
The Lin Fong guy was pure MMA, very well trained.
Yes.
Obviously, he's gassed. He knew a bit of everything. A big heart. The jiu-jitsu guy was very tired, very one-dimensional. But he obviously had some tournament experience. You could see it, right?
Yeah, you could see
And
that.
dude, he did not quit, and he got beat up. But his instincts, his jiu-jitsu and his grappling, I don't know if his jiu-jitsu, he might be a wrestling, I don't know what he's a grappler, right, at the end of the day. He had it in his blood, so no matter how tired he was, he kept making the Lin Fong. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Lin Fong. Great team, by the way. Not trying to disrespect you guys. No, fantastic. They're great fighters, right?
They're great.
But the grappling isn't in their blood yet.
Yeah.
Is the word. And you could see it in the fight when the guy was in trouble. The grappling in his blood got him on top. He didn't make mistakes, And I think you can't fake that, right? So what I think that one of the things, if the territories are interested, there's the beacon, there's the money, there's the future. You can bring your family to a different level. By winning that money. You have to invest on a grassroots level. Amateur MMA is okay, but you can't learn some of those lessons there. You have to learn in grappling. You know, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, grappling tournaments, judo. I mean, some are better than others at teaching certain lessons.
Yeah.
So for me, like wrestlers, they learn how to wrestle, but there's not that many moves. So what you learn is gamesmanship, right? I've never met a wrestler who can't work the game, staying on the edge of the mat, working the timer. They know how to, buy time on top. They know how to listen to their coach. They know how to cut. They know how to pace themselves so that they're stronger. They know how to lean on people. So wrestling teaches you those lessons. Jiu-jitsu teaches you a different lesson. Jiu-jitsu teaches you how to win in any shape possible. They don't care how they look. They don't care if it looks embarrassing. They will find a way to get to that neck, right?
Yes.
And jiu-jitsu will teach you heart, the way wrestling does.
Yep.
But what jiu-jitsu's heart will be is that jiu-jitsu will teach you that no matter how bad life's going, how bad the fight's going, if I can just grab that neck, if I can just grab that opportunity. And I think wrestling teaches you that too, but I think wrestling teaches you a broader, more long-term lesson, which is more valuable, but jiu-jitsu will keep you in the fight.
What's that long-term lesson?
Well, I'll tell you this, for example. If I had 5 guys applying for a job and one was a wrestler, I'd hire the wrestler like that. We could probably get into it now, but it's just a longer conversation.
Yep.
But wrestling will teach you life lessons, how to be a teammate, how to be coachable, how to plan the whole year ahead, not just a week ahead. Because you guys got to cut weight like 50 times a year, So, you guys know how to work the clock. You guys know how to analyze 10 guys in one day and quickly pick up how you can beat them. So there's just so many lessons that wrestling will teach you. Jiu-jitsu has crossovers, but it has different lessons. But the bottom line is, if these territories are serious, they need to compete grappling.
Yeah, they do.
And they need to do it regularly.
And I think because a lot of people have a lot of pride in their striking
100%.
traditions, and they
culture.
don't want to deviate from that. And it doesn't matter if you're a world champion striker,
Yeah.
kickboxer, whatever. That doesn't mean you're going to win an MMA fight.
100%.
What are you going to do when you're on your back and you've got that pressure? What are you going to do?
Yeah, 100%.
There's nothing that you can do.
100%.
Right? So
I won't let my students, no matter what their background is, compete in amateur MMA until they've had at least 10 to 20 grappling matches. I'm out of my mind. But the thing is, it's not just about grappling. It's about learning to listen to your coach. It's about learning to deal with the shits. That nervous tummy that people get. It's
true.
about knowing when you need to go to the toilet or when it's actually just nerves. You know this. To you, this is bread and butter. Right?
And it's something that I forget. That I take for granted.
It's in your soul. It's in your blood.
Because how many MMA fights can you do in a year?
But I watch guys 100%.
3 or 4.
And
you can do that. You can do hundreds in 1 year. In grappling.
And you won't get injured.
And you're going to learn how to pace the fight.
100%. And you're going to learn how to be in front of a crowd.
Yeah.
You're going to learn how to eat when you're nervous.
In the first 50 matches I had, Liam, number 1, I lost most of them. Number 2, I was so nervous.
All the best guys have that same story, though.
And
they all lost their first 50.
Humiliated publicly. Like, girls made fun of me at church, It was like that. But I didn't do it. I never actually thought I was going to be a good wrestler.
Yeah.
I only did it because I wasn't really good at anything else.
Sure.
And I was kind of humiliated publicly when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And
I'm not laughing at you. I'm just laughing at the commonality of that story.
I just wanted to be confident in myself, in my ability to protect myself and to handle myself. That's the only thing I wanted 100%. To do. So I can't imagine. I'm very thankful. Just going into jiu-jitsu, I can't imagine not being a wrestler coming into jiu-jitsu, man. Like, thank God I'm a wrestler.
Yeah.
But because I went through so much humiliation.
Wrestling's way harder than grappling.
Because
jiu-jitsu.
no one cares about how you feel in wrestling at all.
Yeah. Yeah, but you learn how to lose.
There's no belts
too,
either.
Right? Like wrestling teaches you how to lose. That's one thing. If you're doing MMA, you lose twice, you quit.
Yeah.
Wrestling you can lose 100 times a year.
Yeah.
And still go on the next year to be a champ. But if you quit, you're done. You know,
And
man,
you're
there's life
humiliated if you
lessons,
quit.
man.
In a lot of house school gyms, when I was growing up, you quit the wrestling team.
Yeah,
You
sure.
decide to join the wrestling team, and then you quit. You're humiliated.
But you know what I've
Right.
seen in the few wrestlers I've been lucky enough, particularly folk style, because I can't comment that much on the other ones, but folk style particularly, right?
Yes.
And my coach Gary Jones back in Sydney, who's a Philly boy, a Philly wrestler. Jersey boy, Jersey Philly, Jersey boy. He's a Jersey wrestler.
Yeah, those guys are good.
Dude, they're not just
New
good,
Jersey
they
are
are
phenomenal.
wrestlers.
Phenomenal.
But if you ask him, who are you? He's a wrestler.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah,
And I've
yeah,
seen how he
yeah,
takes
yeah.
it into business. And I've seen how he treats his team in business, how he leads by example, how he works, his work ethic. Man, everything's wrestling. Everything's wrestling. His grandpa was a wrestler. And, you know, it's a gift I would love to give to my children. Unfortunately,
You
wrestling's
know where he
not
went
as
to high
available.
school?
I could tell you.
There's
You'd know, you'd know.
a really good, the number one. It was a private school. They were
Right.
by far Blair Academy. There's this.
God, he would know.
And it's from in New Jersey. These guys.
Can I stop to call him?
Yeah, just go ahead and give him a call. But he's going to know who Blair Academy is.
Oh, 100%.
These guys would just wipe the floor with
Dude,
everybody.
if I was a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant, a construction guy, and this wrestler came up to me with the things that he learned in wrestling, I'd hire him like that over anybody. No question, right? Not even a question.
Yeah.
And you know, I see it in you too. I see it in the way you know, you run things, the way you run your organization. A lot of those lessons come through from wrestling. I think also American wrestling uniquely has Christian kind of sermonism, or you know, Christianity built into it.
Yeah.
Some of the more useful parts of it, you know. Well, I'm not criticizing. I just mean you know, like the teamwork, the community-centric,
Yes,
you
it
know,
is.
ideals, the values, you know, the hard work, the sacrifice. I respect that, and I got that as best as I could through judo. You know, and
Yes.
maybe some karate and stuff like that. I think wrestling teaches it. You know, judo definitely teaches it for sure. But
Yeah.
wrestling's fantastic. Look, a lot of these cultures don't have access to that, so they learn it through Muay Thai, they learn it through Kung Khmer,
Yeah.
Lethwei. But again, coming back to the point we're saying, if they really are serious and they really want that beacon and they want to be part of that and really show the world their martial art, they have to invest in their grappling.
They do.
And then secondary, their MMA. Grappling first, MMA second. you know?
And I'm starting to see some hesitation from these strikers.
I get it.
These fighters.
I get it.
But I think that it's going to be clear.
Look, it's not
gonna
rocket
be-
science. It's not rocket
And
science.
there's a lot of fighters, they do not want to grapple. They
Look,
do not want to grapple, but they're not. If they want to win, if they want to become a god of martial art, they want to win the belt, they're going to have to. And I'm not sure. I mean, I can't speak too much about this because it's easy to say that I'm biased.
Yeah, sure,
Because
sure.
I'm a wrestler.
Of course,
I'm a wrestler
of course.
first,
100%.
and a grappler second.
Sure.
You know, when it comes to martial
Sure.
arts, you know.
And a striker fifth.
And like, I'm not a striker at all, right? And
You can figure it out, though. I'm
just-
joking, but you could apply wrestling to figure it out. You could,
Yeah.
if you wanted to.
And I play around with
If it was a
I
priority.
play around with MMA.
Sure,
And
sure,
if I didn't have this neck injury recently, I'd probably do a fight.
Look, most head
Right?
coaches of MMA fighters are wrestlers because they know how to run a room, they know how to, they know the psychology, and so they don't need to know the striking to run a team. You
yeah,
know?
exactly.
But I mean, look, we could talk about wrestling, you and I, forever. But
Yeah.
no, and it's great. But you know, I think with gods of martial arts, what they can do is this, and they are doing it. They can provide a beacon,
Yeah,
financially,
beacon.
and a platform for people to show their culture and their art. Right?
Yes.
They can also invest by having smart matchmaking and promoting the athletes, which is what you guys are doing. You know, trying to turn them into stars.
Yeah.
You can't, however, do it for them. At the end of the day, they have to take the opportunity. What you can do, however, and I think this is something that Saigon Super Fights does over here, for example, is create grappling competitions to reinforce the growth of those cultures.
Yeah.
You can do that professionally and in an amateur sense so that they can get the experience. If they don't take it, you can't do it for them. You
Yeah,
cannot
that's
do
true.
it for them.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's one of the problems with Muay Thai in Thailand is it's such a strong culture. They didn't take to grappling. They don't like being on the floor.
Yeah, they
They don't like learning new things.
And
because
it's
old.
actually very difficult to recruit from Thailand
Well,
for
you
this
show
promotion
me-
because they just want to do Muay Thai.
And why not? They make money doing it. You know, it's familiar.
Yeah.
But you know what? The whole thing about martial arts is about new challenges. You know,
That's
and
true.
so if you want to embody martial arts rather than talk about it, you have to humble yourself. and it's very hard. And you know it. You're starting again. What do you work for? You've worked for startups. You've been in the army. You've done. You have to humble yourself and start again if you want to be a martial artist. And it's tricky and it's challenging. But if these people are serious about their cultures, they need to seek out the best. They need to reinvest in their community, and they need to humble themselves. And that's all there is to it. Otherwise, stay in your little bubble.
Now, in the fighters, the teams that are coming next weekend and that are part of the 2025 international tournament series this year, these guys are open to grappling.
Good.
And
but not just grappling, MMA. It's a different art. But grappling first, for sure.
And they're going to the grappling gyms in their cities, and they're taking it seriously, and they're finding training partners.
But are they competing in grappling? Because you can learn grappling for MMA.
Well, some of them are.
But as we saw last night with that jiu-jitsu guy who went the full time, no matter how tired he was, how bad it was, you need grappling in your blood, and you can only do that by competing.
Well, I'll share this with you. One of the fighters, I'll call him out. His fighting name's Diamond Wynn.
God, that's strong.
And he impressed me a lot not because of any accolades in fighting itself, but because he recognizes the importance of grappling.
Sure.
And he said, "Hey Zach, can I stay a little bit longer? And can you set up some grappling matches for me?"
Yeah, man. Here.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So
this guy's serious, man.
So he's going to stay a couple extra days.
Beautiful.
He's going to come up. And we're going to get some Tuesday night super fights.
Beautiful.
We're going to do Tuesday night super fights on the 27th of this month.
Yeah.
So we're going to try to get some grappling matches for him.
That's awesome.
He gets it.
He gets it.
He understands.
You know what the thing that I think so the internet has provided us with more information than we previously had. So for example, I can go on YouTube and look at a breakdown of Georges St. Pierre, right? Yeah. But no one has become Georges St. Pierre by watching a breakdown of Georges St. Pierre. Georges St. Pierre didn't have YouTube to get those breakdowns. You know what Georges St. Pierre did? Georges St. Pierre took his money out of his pocket, out of the job he had, out of the winnings from his fights, and he traveled. He went, John Danaher's the best, I need to go there. So he'd go to New York. He went to New York to train at the Watt to learn more Muay Thai. I think John Jones did as well. He learned wrestling. He traveled for wrestling. So the thing is, I see the problem, and this question, someone said to me yesterday, how do you see the Vietnamese MMA community going over the next 5 years? And I said, I'm not sure. I think Vietnamese people are good athletes and good martial artists. That's there, right? They're good teammates. They're supportive of each other. That's there, right? What I don't see is their investment in themselves. I don't see the sacrifice and investment. They're too comfortable. They use the internet too much. I ask a guy who's a professional fighter, have you traveled to do martial arts? They won't go out of their own suburb. You talk
about individuals?
Individuals.
Yeah,
teams too, coaches. Because everyone wants to hold on to their fief, They don't want to bring in new people, and this is a problem. So there's a whole other discussion.
No, that's a really good observation.
Coaches and athletes are symbiotic, So the coach has to play the game too, not just the athlete, right? But the thing is, okay, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
You are one of 4 wrestlers, maybe 3 wrestlers in Vietnam. There are probably 300 MMA fighters in Vietnam right now. How many of them have come to seek you out to train?
Not many.
10, 20?
Less than 10, I guess.
Well, I know one of the teams, obviously Lin Fung and stuff.
The team, I've taught a lot of gyms here, which is good.
Sure.
And I've had probably at least 500 students.
Yeah.
If you combine all the seminars and everything, but how many have?
That's you laying the seeds.
Yeah.
Not the other way around.
Exactly. How many have come to me because they want to learn specifically wrestling and grappling because they recognize the importance and value of it in an MMA fight?
Or in life, so
yeah.
It's a whole other topic.
not many. I can count on one hand probably.
But that's
but it's actually interesting. One of the ones that did was actually Jovidon when I first got here.
Oh, sure. Well, look how he's doing.
But he could actually beat me in wrestling.
Yeah, but he's also bigger than you.
This was about 2 years ago when I first got here.
Sure.
Jovidon gets it because he's a fighter, and what does he do? He seeks out all the best wrestlers, and 100%. Someone probably told him. Some people probably think I'm better that I'm better than I really am, and at the time, I went to Jovidon's gym and wrestled with him and everything like that, but he's an international guy.
Yeah,
he's from he has been in fighting for a long time.
Yeah.
And he understands
Look
I
how
need
he's
to be
going,
good
though.
at this, and he's done 400 fights.
He's probably the most prominent MMA fighter here right now.
And you saw a student last night. Did you notice any difference in his student?
Yeah.
Then
He was
so
well-rounded.
the first 3 fights, and then when his student came up, which was his debut, by the way.
Was it his debut?
It was his debut. Did you see that?
Yeah. The Matt return.
Sure. Who did that come from?
Sure.
Jovidan.
Sure. Of course.
And it's incredible. And it was by that point I was getting a little frustrated, to be honest with you, seeing people in dominant position with back control
100%.
and just letting their hips slide to the mat.
Well, hold on a second. This is something that a lot of. Okay, so this is partly jiu-jitsu's fault. And so we're segueing a little bit, but it's an interesting point, though, is that so wrestlers understand this, jiu-jitsu guys don't. Jiu-jitsu guys largely only understand rides, right? So like they'll get the back and they'll ride. They don't understand breakdowns and turnovers. So wrestlers understand breakdowns, they understand turnovers and rides, and they understand the different times to use those things. Jiu-jitsu guys largely will only do rides. There's a little bit of breaking down, but not on a high level, and definitely not instinctually. So I think even the high-level jiu-jitsu guys in MMA right now tend to jump off. They tend to fall off the bat. They just still don't do breakdowns. So I think wrestling still has a ton to offer. And for you as a wrestler to watch that happening, that's the end of the fight. You get the back. That should be the end.
It's over with. There's so many positions.
It should be done.
There's so many positions you can get to, even from the same standing position. I try to teach my students this.
Yeah.
Once you get to this point, the fight's over.
But here's the tricky thing is, okay, so here's the one thing I will say, that a lot of people seek out wrestling to learn wrestling for jiu-jitsu or MMA. And you can.
Yeah. That's a good
but
point.
I don't think it's good. And one of the worst things you can do is approach a boxing coach to learn boxing for MMA. Because the best lessons of boxing and the best lessons of wrestling come from doing wrestling for wrestling. Mm-hmm. Bruce Lee, absorb what you can, throw out what's useful, throw out what's not useful, take what is useful, whatever the paraphrasing. What that led a bunch of people to do is to just nitpick, right? But a lot of the lessons of wrestling aren't on the surface; they're below the surface, and you have to wrestle. You have to actually go to a wrestling competition to learn that.
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
You have to go to a boxing fight to actually take the real lessons of boxing. You can't just do it on pads. It's not good enough.
I just saw a reel with Taporia.
Brilliant guy.
And
outspoken.
I think he was a clip from the recent Joe Rogan podcast.
Sure.
But he said, I don't train MMA.
Yeah.
I train boxing, I train wrestling, I train grappling.
Yeah.
And right before the fight and right before the fight, now I'm learning how to put them all together. But I learn, I study, I advance my knowledge on each specific
100%.
martial art, and then I put it together. I don't just do the MMA.
Well, okay, so there's a tricky point there I want to bring up, if you don't mind. But,
yes.
But coming back to him for 1 second, I still haven't seen any empirical evidence that training MMA will make you a champion on its own. To this day, the majority of champions have a single sport background. Mm-hmm. They don't have to be an Olympian, and actually being an Olympic gold medalist actually reduces your chances of being a champion. Being a third place medalist actually works better than being that's a whole other, because you play the rules, obviously. When the gold medalist in judo sometimes never throws anyone. He just outgrips them.
Okay,
the gold medalist in wrestling knows how to play the game, for example, right? But
yeah.
The third place guy usually does well in MMA for whatever reason. But
and more open to other arts.
Yeah,
maybe.
I think they're less specific than it. So to be the third place guy, you're still adaptable. To be a gold medalist, you're very specific for your sport, right?
Yeah.
So, but the point I'm trying to make is, I have not seen evidence yet that someone without a single sport background will do better than some. Single sport backgrounds give you the lessons you need, and especially if it's a grappling sport. Yes. Because grappling sport means you can close your eyes and go to sleep and wake up a grappler. You can wake up in the middle of the night with a guy mounted on you and you'll just hip escape out. You can wake up in a front headlock and you'll pummel the arm. The thing is that MMA itself is still a new art, right? But there's a but there. If I was to train somebody to be a champion with the goal long term of reaching your beacon, the GMA's beacon of being a star in the sport, I would start them in MMA as an art, just for a year or two. And I'll explain why in a second. Because there is now an art of MMA that's unique to MMA. right? Then I would put them in a single sport for the next 5 to 10 years, wrestling, judo, jiu-jitsu, whatever, right? Because I don't think MMA will teach you the lessons that those arts will teach you. Gamesmanship, teamwork, coachability, all those sort of things, right? But I learnt them separately, right? Same as you did as well. So when I spar with someone who's got an MMA background now, so if I have a kid, I started in MMA and he did 2 years and then he goes and does boxing, jiu-jitsu, etc., I will struggle with him because my brain has to switch between arts. Because I didn't start with the coding of MMA, right?
Okay.
If you start a kid with the coding, he can flow between ranges like it's natural, right?
Okay.
But I'd still put him in a single sport for 10 years, you know, because you cannot, in my opinion, you cannot go to the top. You know, like Jack Shaw's a really good example of this. Love that guy. Super technical, pure MMA guy. Did really well for a while. But after a while, he just didn't have that one thing that made him special, you know?
Yeah.
And you see that a lot. You see it a lot in MMA. So I would suggest to these guys is to get an education in the art of MMA, which takes 3 to 6 months. But then I would invest in grappling for 5 to 10 years. You know, I don't think that MMA will teach you what you need to know to be a champ.
Yeah,
exactly. You can't learn it there. Does that point make sense?
No, absolutely.
It's a little long-winded, but I hope it makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. And it's going to be interesting because you don't really have a lot of grappling promotions in Cambodia, in Myanmar, Laos.
Have you considered doing them yourself?
If the resources are there, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
You know, I would definitely do it.
Yeah.
All I need is resources, time, and I can pretty much do anything. It's always, for me, it always comes down to the lack of resources.
Yeah.
But those
and time.
But thankfully, it's slowly getting better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
But those guys staying here and competing in Saigon Superfight, those are the guys who are going to stand out.
Yeah.
They're going to stand out from everybody, and everyone will be like, he got lucky.
We'll see.
He got lucky.
It's going to be interesting, but I think the right people are starting to recognize the potential. Like Boss,
yep.
He competes in ADCC at the
100%,
professional level, and he's good.
100%.
He's really good. And I wouldn't want to be on the other side of the ring.
And the thing is no matter how tight he is, he's going to have that experience that the other MMA guys who have 2 fights a year won't have. You know, at the end of the day.
I get a little frustrated, Liam.
I'm sure
when I watch these MMA fighters, and they're getting tired. Why are you getting tired? You should never be tired.
They don't know how to breathe.
You should literally never be tired, ever.
Yeah.
Like how you only have one fight. You only have 3 rounds.
Sure.
You know.
Sure.
And it's like I just have a hard time understanding, and I also have a hard time watching people when they've been in 5 or 6 different positions where they could have ended the fight and they didn't end the fight.
It kills me when I see a guy in a dominant position, he just doesn't finish.
I
That
know.
should be the end.
I saw it last.
100%.
We saw it last night. Way too many times.
And you know what I'm starting to see, which I don't love, is the influence of modern nogi jiu-jitsu leg locks in MMA. There is a time to leg lock, and there are guys who can effectively leg lock in jiu-jitsu, in MMA, and finish the fight, right?
Yeah.
But there's a limited number of leg locks you should be doing. So, for example, outside heel hook is a waste of time right now. You know, the one that turns, the heel goes that way, for the people who don't know. However, inverted heel hook, with the right leverage, should finish a fight every time, right? Because you'll break the leg. You'll actually break the leg, right? So, but I saw a few guys that were exhausted yesterday giving up position to go for leg locks. I'm not against leg locks, but it's not Abu Dhabi. You know?
As a wrestler, I'm extremely biased. Is giving up position is asinine.
But asinine is a good word.
Why would you give?
But that was the
people
philosophy.
are so willing to give up position.
Yes. Well, they don't have the knowledge. And the thing is, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the experience, and they don't have the willingness to get the knowledge or the experience. Those are the 3 things you need, right? But look, coming back to it, the guys who recognize that will get ahead. No question, right? And watching last night, there was some frustration for me watching because the information is out there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But I will say, you know, coming back to GMA, right? You guys have put up that blinker. There is a promotion in this area that will take care of you, give you good matchups, fair matchups.
Yep.
They will invest in your country and your art.
Yes, they will.
And the thing is that they probably, if they are serious about it long term, they need to probably now look at an amateur MMA circuit.
That's a good point.
And I'll explain why in a second to further that point. That's not just on the logic level, but also they need to invest in the grappling, because the bottom line is there's one man doing Saigon super fights, and one man can only do so much.
Yeah.
You know, I think that an organization, because you look at the UFC invests in it, the karate, what's the name, Combat Karate's investing in it.
That's a fun. It's a cool promotion
ONE
to
FC
watch.
is investing in it, in grappling, you know. And I think, you know, that's an arena people, MMA fighters, need the experience in, you know.
Yeah.
And if the events aren't there, well, where do they compete, you know? So you're
That's a
already
big
doing
point.
that job. I would love to see GMA investing in I think grappling first.
Yeah.
Some sort of research source that is helpful for Vietnamese, but also then moving it into some of the quieter countries, you know,
Yep.
as far as martial arts goes, and then an amateur circuit to give people the opportunity to get experience. Because Vietnamese themselves could definitely go to the top when it comes to MMA, athletically.
Yes.
For sure, no question. They're super athletic and super committed to martial arts, but the shows also have to invest in the community and vice versa. So
Yeah.
I'd like to see that happen. I don't know if it will, but you know, if the boss is listening, I think that's a really good place to go. You know,
Yeah. That's really
it'll
good
pay
insight.
off for them.
For sure.
You know, at the top level.
Yeah, for sure.
So you know that the UFC does this actually. They invest in amateur feeder shows in Australia.
Well, I did not know that.
Well, that's where the talent comes from, right? And if the talent goes to the UFC, guess what happens? They get more pay-per-views in the area.
Okay.
So the UFC will invest quietly in shows in Mexico, shows in Australia, shows in all the territories they'd like to grow. You know, they can't just rely on some guy, you know, who likes fighting doing it. You know, they have to actually find the serious shows and help grow them. So in Australia, we have a bunch of shows, but there's one or two premium ones now. Oh God, Eternal, for example, where the UFC uses them as a feeder show for themselves. You know, so they even get involved in a governmental level in some places, like in Melbourne, for example. They helped to get a government in that was going to, you know, be pro MMA, because they couldn't use cages in Melbourne for a long time. So the UFC actually helped the government that was pro that, you know, get into power, because that's investment, you know. So I'd like to see GMA as the most serious show right now doing that.
That's very good insight.
Just in my opinion. I don't know.
Well, I mean, you have a lot of insight.
I've got a broad
Yeah.
experience, I think, you know,
Yeah.
as a coach and as a fan,
Yep.
you know. So there's a lot of information I know, but it's just something I think about a lot here, you know. And I see you guys are serious. You guys are serious. You know?
Yeah. And open to suggestion.
Yeah, I know for sure. Look, I mean, you can't do it for them at the end of the day, right? So you can put up the beacon, you can provide the grappling shows. They have to take it and do it, you know. They have to seek out the actual coaches. They have to go and find information and reinvest their money into themselves. You know, one of the things I was coming back to, a lot of young MMA fighters now and jiu-jitsu fighters too don't travel. They don't invest in themselves to travel and learn. You know, when I heard that athletes staying after the show to learn, that's what we did at the UFC. People say to me, what was the best thing about the UFC, right? The best thing was I got to be backstage with all of the best coaches. I was in the hotel, I go up to Greg Jackson. Hey, Greg Jackson, you know, big fan of yours, nicest guy. Can I take you for breakfast tomorrow?
Okay.
Sure. Took Greg Jackson for breakfast. Talks to me about weight cutting, fight him. I'm like, dude, he cares about the sport. So he's happy to take young guys like me and help us. You know, when we go to the UFC in Vegas, we stay. We pay our own money to have a little bit extra so we can train with all the guys. You know, we go to anywhere. We take that opportunity to go and train because we were serious about growing. I don't see a lot of people doing that nowadays.
Yeah.
But there are people. But my suggestion to young people, the promotion can't do it for you.
Yes.
That's your opportunity to travel. When you land here, stay for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Seek out Zach, seek out Corey, seek out, you know, anybody. You know, I can mention tons of black belts here that are amazing, you know. Wrestlers, jiu-jitsu guys. Stay, learn, bring back to your community, share. That's what GSP did. You know what made GSP a champion? Don't say steroids.
No.
I'm joking. GSP was one of the biggest investors in his own team. You will see him in the corner of his amateur fighters. He would travel to John Danaher and bring that information back for his team. So do that. It's not rocket science. Do that.
Yep.
You can't rely on GMA. They can do what they can do, but if you're a community or a fighter, you have to invest in yourself.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
I can't stress that enough. And if you don't, sit at the bar complaining to your friends about how there's no money in MMA, like everybody else does. Go on Reddit and complain about how there's not enough money in.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what people do who don't want to invest in themselves.
Exactly.
You know, don't be that person.
That's a really good point. And we saw, just your Jovedon student.
Sure, last night.
And
fantastic.
I've seen that guy at Shark Open Mat
Sure.
at least 15 times.
Yeah.
This kid invested in himself, and we saw that.
Look, I understand also, you know, there are kids who can't afford to travel, you know. They're in places of poverty where they don't have money to travel, but the shows bring you out here.
They do bring you out here.
You're coming, stay.
And you're getting paid for the fight.
Yeah.
And then if you win, you make even more money. You don't have to pay to get here. You don't have to pay
100%.
for your room. Spend a couple $100 of the $1,000 that you get
100%.
or whatever. Stay another week, and you can go to free.
Dude,
like as of right now, there's an open mat right now at Shark right now. You can go for free, and you can learn from Raymond. You can learn from Corey. You can learn from Alex.
100%.
You can learn from all these guys, and that's what it's going to take to win.
But you know what the thing is too is, you know, you can stay here for, you know, $50 a day. You can eat and have accommodation.
Yes.
You can find a way.
You can stay for $20 a day.
Well, you can find a way. If you want to make excuses, the Beacon can't do it for you. You know, at the end of the day.
This is probably the easiest country in Southeast Asia to do that.
Well, 100%.
You know, and I've only been to like 3 or 4 of the other ones, but in Vietnam, it's easy to make things happen. Like
100%.
There's always, it's easy to find a way in Vietnam.
Correct.
Because there's always someone who's willing to help.
I've never met anyone successful that didn't find a way.
Yeah,
it's not always the way you think.
Exactly.
But there's always a way.
Yeah.
You know, and you know it, man. You go have guys come to your gym, they want to learn wrestling. I can't afford it. Well, what did you do to wrestle? Wrestling didn't pay. You got a job. You got a shit job, dude. I worked in kitchens. I did whatever I could to buy to get enough money to pay for my training, and then to go to Brazil once in a while or Thailand. Man, I would have bought a house earlier. You know, I would have been much richer.
And there's very few.
Financially,
There's very few grappling or jiu-jitsu coaches. If a student comes in and says, "Hey, I want to learn, but I don't have any money. Can I do something?" How many jiu-jitsu coaches are going to tell them?
Okay, I say no to those people now.
Oh, you say no to them?
For a different reason.
Oh, okay.
I grew up, my parents were karate teachers.
Yep.
I was taught you should never turn someone away for money.
Okay.
And my parents would let people train for free. When I ran my academy, for the first 10 years, anybody in that situation, I'd figure something out for them.
Okay.
The problem I have is, and there are genuine situations where charity or giving someone a foot up pays off, right? For sure. The majority of situations, those people are just fucking lazy.
Okay.
You know, but there are situations where if a guy comes to you and says, "Look, I can't afford it, but I can do your website for you."
Yeah, exactly. Those are the guys I'm talking about.
No, I agree with that. I agree with that. But the majority of people who say they can't afford it are just fucking lazy.
Okay, yeah.
In
well, I'm talking about the guys who are like, "Hey, I'll clean up the mats. I'll make some videos for you."
If I'm honest with you, because I'm with you, dude. I'm with you on that. But if I'm honest with you, that's 3% of the people who ask.
3%. Okay.
3% of the people who ask. But
you know how I am. I'm too.
I'm like you too.
I'm naive. I'm a little naive.
No, it's not. Look, I had the same words.
Look at the best in people.
Look, I was in the first 10 years. I let people do that. What I found is that the people who want it badly enough will find a way. And the thing is, the guys who can't afford $30 a week, right? If they can't find a way, the finding a way is part of their journey.
Yeah, exactly.
So actually, I hate to say it, but turning them away is almost a test to see if they can go out there and find a way.
Exactly.
So I'm not saying you shouldn't give them the opportunity, and I have, and I still do. Well, I mean, I did when I had my gym. But the thing is there's nothing wrong with saying, come back in 3 months when you find a job. It's part of his journey. Look, when someone's trying to become, if you don't mind me saying this, it's a bit of a segue. When the journey to the UFC or to the top of GMA or anywhere is long, right?
Yes.
And there's a few things you need to learn and master. And if I can tell you, like I can summarize it in 5 things, right? You need to find a coach that you trust and be with them. They all happen to be C's, right? You have to master the coaching and being coachable, right?
Okay.
You have to master the combat. You know, you have to learn and master. And holy shit, fucking shark just jumped out of the hell. Dude, this is Vietnam. The fuck? A fish this big just jumped out of the lake behind us.
Man,
I love this place, dude.
You love this place?
I love this place. It's so good.
Every day is an adventure.
Dude, it was that big.
Every day. Yeah, there's shark in this little
Vietnam.
pond
I hope
here.
no one ever figures out how awesome Vietnam is, man. The people, the place, the opportunities, it's just the greatest.
I'm just gonna start telling people.
Don't tell
in
anyone.
America, Vietnam's a terrible
It's
place.
a horrible
Don't
place.
come
Don't come here.
No, you don't want Americans to come here and ruin it.
Stay at Boy Vienne.
Yeah, exactly.
I love Boy Vienne, dude. It's like a moth lamp for the kind of people I don't want to hang out with. They all go there, and I'm just like, oh, cool. You know what I mean? You just see them dead at the bottom of the lamp by the end of the day.
Oh my God!
Come back to what we were talking about before. You know, there's 5 C's. You want to be a fighter.
Okay.
You got 5 to 10 years to master it before you become a top pro star. Vietnam's our secret. I don't want anyone to know about it. It's so great, man. You know.
Yeah.
I'm gonna move
okay,
back.
it's 5 C's. We got coaching. What else we got?
Yeah. So coaching, coachability is one, right?
Okay.
You know, you got to master the combat. You got to master the art, right? Of course,
Yeah.
the timing, the motion. You know, you've got to master the cut. You know, and that's something that a lot of people are getting better at now with the internet. Thank God, the information's out there. They learn how to cut weight properly and effectively and rehydrate. It's getting better, right? They need to master the camp. Learning how to do an effective camp is very important. We used to do 12-week camps. My fighters would get flu every 4 weeks. Then we figured out you only need like a 4 to 6 week camp.
Oh,
You know, they need to periodize, you know. You can get this information, it's out there, right? But you have to test it, and you test it with grappling, with single sports. You don't test it with your MMA career. That's how you die, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, you know, you've got coachability, you've got combat you have to master. You have to master the cut. You have to master the camp, and you have to master your cents and dollars. If you can't master your financial situation, you're not going to make it. Too many people drop out or end up getting like 9-0, and then they're like, I need a real job.
Oh,
You know,
I see what you're saying.
You need to master your cents and dollars, man. You need to have either a side job or sponsors. You need to learn how to invest. The first time I saw
They gotta learn from Connor.
Wow. Well, Mike Tyson, he goes bankrupt every 4 weeks, you know, then finds $1 million in a shoebox. He's like, oh, what's that? It's like, what's $1 million? But, oh God, dude, if you ever want to read the greatest book ever written on combat sport, Mike Tyson's Undisputed, it's the greatest. It goes through everything not to do in combat sport.
Oh, okay.
But he's really honest in it. I think it's a great lesson. Look, if you want to master combat sports, those 5 C's,
Okay.
man, buy Tyson's book. There are books out there, Black Lights. There's tons of books in sports that have hundreds of years experience of this, right? But come back to my point is you have to master your financial situation, man. You know, because your coach doesn't want to hear about your problems. He wants to focus.
Dude, that's a good point.
You know, and the other thing is you need to find a coach you trust, and you've got to be coachable. And give them a chance. No one's perfect. You know, no one coach will have everything, but find someone who can go with you, you know, on the journey for 10 years, because it's a 10-year journey, you know. Combat sport, that's the easiest part. Find coaches, master the combat sport, mastering the cut, information's out there. Mastering the camp, information's out there, but you are your own science experiment, and you need to go and compete as much as you can in grappling and everything else, boxing and stuff, to master those 5 C's before you hit the big time, you know. So it's pretty simple. It's there, you know. It's not rocket science.
Yes.
But I think that turning someone away who can't afford to train for the right reasons with encouragement teaches them to go on the right journey to master, you know, their cents and dollars, man. If they don't do that, it's going to be trouble the whole way.
Yeah.
You know, so that's a lesson I think it's important to learn.
That's really good. Liam,
what it
thank
is.
you so much for...
Yeah, man, we barely scratched the surface, but you know, have a good time.
And you bring so much knowledge and experience and insight and humility. There's so many
mistakes.
There's so many people in this country, Liam, that aren't taking advantage of the knowledge that you bring here.
Well, I appreciate that.
And I feel like I just discovered gold that and no one else is looking at. I really do value your opinion, and you've helped myself and Adam and the Saigon Super Fights grow our promotion, and we take what you say seriously. And I know that the gods of martial arts and can benefit, Liam, from your perspective. You've seen it. You've seen everything. You've been on Joe Rogan.
I've made a lot of mistakes.
I didn't even know you were on Joe Rogan until I started doing research. You're such a humble guy, right?
Oh man, you know what the thing is? It's not that I'm humble, man. I'm just trying to reinvent myself constantly. Because if I don't, I get complacent.
Yes.
You know, so I think dragging my past stuff in to conversations doesn't give me the opportunity to have a fresh relationship with someone like yourself.
Okay.
Because I got a lot to learn from you too, man. You know, and you know, one thing I really appreciated when I landed here, I looked around. There were a few places You know, like C88 was great, Corey over under was amazing, and what you were doing, the energy really attracted me. You know, and
thank you.
so I've got a lot to learn from you guys too, but I just really enjoy being part of people with values and vision and discipline. Because without those three things, it falls apart. And I see that in what you're doing, I see that in GMA. You know, so anything I can contribute that can help you not make the same mistakes I made, I'm very happy to.
Just being around.
You know, well, you guys are the future for my kids.
Yeah.
You know, when my kids get to the right age, I want you to be their wrestling coach. I want them to compete in GM, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
so if that's not there, I haven't done the right things. So if I can help, I'd love to help.
Thank you. And that about wraps up our show. Liam, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, man. It's been fantastic.
Yep. To everyone watching, thank you so much for tuning in on episode 6 of GMA Beyond the Fight. Remember, our first international Gods of Martial Art event is going to be this Saturday, the 24th of May at 7 p.m. here at GMA Arena. Last night was the first of 8 events in this 2025 season, and this is a big tournament series. We have a Vietnamese side of the bracket. We have an international side of the bracket. And at the end of the year, it's going to culminate into the international final. It's going to be absolutely incredible.
And it's televised too here?
It's going to be live.
Wow.
It's going to be live. Folks, we'll see you next week at the first ever Gods of Martial Arts international event this Saturday here at GMA Arena. Goodbye. Okay.